All right, so we're on lesson 5, the women's suffrage movement, and you are going to describe the causes, goals, and strategies, opposition, and effects of the women's suffrage movement. So suffrage is the right to vote in political elections. This is going to be one of those words. Oh, there we go. This is going to be one of those words where it is not going to look like the word it's closest to, which is suffering. It has nothing to do with suffering. Suffrage has to do with the right to vote. Now, what we're going to see sometimes is the phrase universal suffrage, which means everyone can vote. So when something is universal, everyone has it. Now, a suffragette is a woman seeking the right to vote through organized protest. This last word, militant, is going to come up a lot. Hopefully, when you see this word militant, you are thinking about the idea of a military. All right, it's combative and aggressive in support of a political or social cause, and typically favoring extreme, violent, or confrontational methods. So people who are very militant are typically using their extreme, violent, confrontational methods. So when women win the right to vote, so it begins starting in 1893 with New Zealand and then progresses through till 2011. There are still some areas in some countries where women do not necessarily always have the right to vote or don't have the same equal opportunities as men. So you can see that the United States granted it in 1928. It took Britain and Ireland until 1928 to give full women's suffrage. There was some limited women's suffrage earlier than that. France is going to do it after World War I, as well as Italy. India will do it in 1950 once they process through their independence. So your question says, what does this timeline tell us about the struggle for women's suffrage? So throughout most of history, women were treated as inferior to men. Hopefully we know that the word inferior means lower. 18th century Europe. Okay, when we think about 18th century, we're talking 1700s. So the century, you always subtract 1 to get to the year. Women were not as educated as men because of a lack of opportunities to go to school, and they were restricted by laws and customs that made women look to marriage as means of stability and made them dependent on men. So what we're seeing is a level of social and society that created customs where women had to get married as the only means of support. Women were expected to marry, have children, take care of the home, and they were not allowed to vote. Women were not allowed to access their money. This is key. So they're not allowed to access their money. So this would mean that any inheritance went to men. So even if it was given to a woman, it was under their father's, brother's, or husband's control. If they were not married, if their father was dead, they had no brothers, it would go into a lawyer's control. If a husband, here's something that's really important to understand, if a husband divorced his wife or kicked her out, okay, so the idea being that he is making this decision, she has no rights over her children. So at that point, the husband could do as he wished with those children. He could send them off to another school. He could get rid of them. It was up to him. So the suffrage movement in Great Britain is going to be much more militant. There's our key word for today. All right, so women would break windows, bomb mailboxes, cut telegraph lines. Some women use peaceful methods, and when you learn in U.S. history, you're going to see a lot more of those peaceful methods. However, for the most part, what you are going to see in Great Britain is going to be a little bit more on that militant side. In 1918, women over 30 who were married, so you had to be over the age of 30, you had to be married, or a member of the local government were allowed to vote, with the idea being that you would just vote as your husband. You would not have your own ideas or your own thoughts. You would just vote the same as your husband. Emily Wilding Davison died 4 days after being knocked down by a horse. So the video that is right after this one is about Emily Wilding Davison for you to watch to learn more about her. She is a suffragette who attempted to go after her right to vote, and she was much more on that militant side. Thousands of suffragettes attended her funeral, and it is unknown if she planned to die or if she just planned to cause a disruption at the race that she was at. And then how far did the authorities go? You can see some examples of this in the video that is after Emily Wilding Davison. Women were arrested and thrown in jail, and very typically they would go on hunger strikes, which would mean that they would then be force-fed. If they were not force-fed, they would be released, given maybe a week or two to get themselves back to being more healthy, and then they'd be arrested again. And then women suffragettes who were arrested were praised, by other women for their courage. We will watch a movie that gets more into detail about the suffrage movement and who they were.